Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, my name is Ken Fulvin. I'm the Senior Director of Quality Assurance for Clear Capital. And like many of you, I'm a certified real estate appraiser myself and am very excited to spend some time today to talk about desktop appraisals and how we can help you to be successful in fulfilling those assignments. So welcome to our webinar.
Welcome indeed. Thanks, Ken. I'm Todd Ewerts. I'm also a certified residential appraiser, and I'm the appraisal quality assurance trainer here at Clear Capital. Thank you all for being here. It really is a pleasure to have this time to get together and do the best we can to navigate these changing times. By the wonderful attendance, I've got my eye on the chat here. Thank you, everybody, for chiming in and saying hello from all over the country. I'm seeing some familiar names in there as well. We're going to go ahead and get started and do the best we can to answer all of your questions about this product. But first, let's just begin with a brief overview of what we're going to cover. As appraisers, we've been inundated with terms over the last couple of years, like hybrid, like desktop. It's difficult to navigate these waters and know the difference between these different products that we've been asked to navigate. So we want to start by just giving a broad overview about what is the desktop product, kind of how did we get here, and provide just kind of an industry overview. The desktop data collection process is something that appraisers really need to be familiar with. It's probably not a secret that these desktop products are going to require a floor plan with interior walls. Appraisers might have a hard time reconciling that, given that this is a desktop. So it's well understood in the industry that the institutions that are ordering these assignments are going to have to give the appraisers some help in this regard. Now, what that help looks like, how that data is collected, and how it's packaged and provided to the appraisers is going to be different from one AMC to another. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what steps Clear Capital is taking to partner with you to get you the information that you need to be able to perform these assignments and complete them with credible results. Now, while it is important to distinguish, I think, what Clear Capital is doing, I think would be remiss if we didn't spend some time talking about the resources that are going to be helpful to you to navigate. We understand, and we certainly appreciate those of you that have partnered with Clear Capital in the past. And before I forget, a quick shout out to our friends over at Clario. Thank you for joining us. Clario being our full-time staff appraisers that work exclusively with Clear Capital. Thank you for your support. It's great to see your names here. We want to provide you with the resources that you'll need to be successful generally, right? This is a bigger industry change than just us here in this group. And so Ken, you and I were of like mind when we put this together. We've attended a lot of these webinars and gathered as much info as we can. So we want to do everything we can to make it very dense with resources. And also, you know, it's a tough change to navigate, but there also are a tremendous amount of benefits to this type of product that we want to cover as well. And then, as prepared as we tried to be today, invariably there are going to be some questions that we didn't get to, so we want to leave a little bit of time at the end to answer any questions that you might have. And should we unfortunately run out of time, like I said, it's quite a big group. I think we've got over 300 people in attendance today, which is fantastic. But we will be sure to get back to you individually after the presentation day if we're not able to get to you in the course. All right, so Ken, I'm going to kick it off to you. Get us started with desktop appraisals. So as I mentioned in the intro, anyone that's been appraising for a while is familiar with desktop assignments, but desktop assignments that require a floor plan, that's something new. Something else new are desktop assignments which are approved for the collateralization of a loan. So maybe give us a little background if you could and fill us in on how we got here.
Yeah, let's get into it, Todd. I think it's great. You know, as you mentioned, that primarily it's all appraisers on this call. So our objective here is to try to get into the weeds a little bit on the actual desktop appraisal and give you some valuable insight. But before we get into that and how we're going to help you fulfill the desktop appraisal, let's give you just a little bit of background on how the desktop appraisal came to be. So the GSEs have formally added the desktop appraisal to their selling guide. So that's both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac last month have officially added the desktop appraisal to their selling guides. And during our national pandemic with COVID, many of you probably completed COVID desktop appraisal assignments during that period of time. In fact, just a little fun fact for you, about 82% of our appraisal panel our appraiser panel completed COVID desktop assignments. So that was a variation of a desktop assignment that was out there during our pandemic. And after that transpired, the GSEs evaluated the COVID desktop assignment and really identified that there was limited risk associated to certain levels of transactions. So that was one of the reasons that that gave them a little bit more ammunition to come up with or approve the desktop appraisal. So that, along with appraiser capacity constraints, is another reason. So there's several variables there, but one of which was the theory was kind of tested out through the COVID desktop assignments. And again, limited risk associated with that. So they did identify the GSEs as one possible concern, and that was around GLA differences. And so that is one of the reasons that a floor plan is going to be a requirement, or is a requirement, of the desktop appraisal. And spoiler alert for the group, here at Clear Capital, we have a solution for that floor plan problem that existed, and we're going to touch on that here in a little bit. We can go ahead and move on to the next slide. Give a little bit of overview here on the desktop appraisal itself. So the official form name given by the GSEs, you're going to hear this thrown around a couple different ways, but the official name is the Fannie Mae 1004 Desktop Appraisal Report. And for Freddie Mac, it is a Freddie Mac Form 70D. That is the official names of the form that you can see. Talk a little bit about eligibility for the desktop appraisal. So there are some requirements that eligible loans need to meet, one of which is being a purchase loan, also having an LTV less than or equal to 90%, and it's only single unit residential properties are eligible. So there are obviously then a number of ineligible property types, and just to throw some of those out there for you, like examples being multifamily properties, condos, co-ops, manufactured homes. Those are all, even second homes, those are all ineligible property types for the desktop appraisal. And overall, the desktop appraisal, as we're going to show you here in a little bit, it's really similar to your traditional 1004 URAR. There's going to be some differences with the form that we're going to get into, but overall it's relatively similar. So talk a little bit about why the desktop. We've got a couple slides here that we're going to go through, but first off, let's talk about why the desktop. So one, there's a number of reasons why the desktop is going to be an important step in our appraisal modernization strategy that the GSEs are going through. One, it mitigates capacity constraints. There's been a big capacity constraint with appraisers, supply and demand issue over the past several years. As I mentioned before, there's minimal increase in collateral risk associated with some of these loans, like the purchase loans I just talked about with low LTVs, and also will allow for an improved disaster or pandemic response time should anything happen again. And that could be not only for something like COVID, like a pandemic like that, but we also have natural disasters that seem to come around every year, and whether that be hurricanes or wildfires, the desktop appraisal could help be a solution in some of those markets when that happens too. So faster response time for some of that, and then overall faster turn times on this. It's been proven that this product can be completed relatively quicker than your traditional appraisal. So let's go ahead here. I think this is just a little bit more background on the why of the desktop appraisal. And I think this graph is a really great illustration of the situation that we're in as an industry as a whole. And what this is this chart represents UCDP appraisal submission volume by year. And you can see that it's purchase and refinance volume there. So this is appraisal submissions through the UCDP over the past couple of years. You can see the big spike in appraisal volume started really around 2019. That continued through 2021, Still relatively high in 2022, though it has come down a little bit, but nonetheless here, the point being is you can see the appraisal volume skyrocketing, which I'm sure most of you as appraisers, you can relate to how busy you've been the past couple of years. But the number of unique licensed appraisers has remained stable throughout that entire time. And that's really created a supply and demand issue for the industry. There's more volume out there than what appraisers have capacity to handle. So the GSEs needed to get creative, come up with some alternative solutions to try to help homeowners and borrowers alike be able to achieve those desires a lot quicker than historically when what we've been seeing because of that supply and demand issue. So we can go ahead and transition to the next slide here. And as a result, there's this, I think this is a great illustration here of, this is provided by Fannie Mae, but it's the modern valuation spectrum. And overall what this is an overview of the valuation product cascade by Fannie Mae. And you can see here that there's really two categories when it comes to this. You have the data-driven solutions, which is over on the left-hand side, and then you have appraiser-dependent solutions on the right-hand side. And you can see there right in the middle on the right-hand side, desktop appraisals are there. So in terms of a cascade of eligible transactions, it starts over on the left-hand side in terms of appraisal waivers. Certainly appraisal waivers are a thing for the industry and doesn't require anything beyond, eligible loans don't require anything beyond an appraisal waiver. And then it moves on to inspection-based appraisal waivers, where there's actually a property data collection product is completed, and that's whether it's done by a real estate agent or an inspector or an appraiser, but that person would go out to the property, do a specified inspection, and then the lender would determine if the loan is eligible for just an inspection-based waiver. And if the properties wouldn't qualify based on that criteria, then you get into the appraiser-based solutions. And we've got our desktop appraisal. That is which we're going to go into details on today. But that's obviously an appraisal where the appraiser is not physically inspecting the property. It would move upwards to our hybrid appraisal, where someone does a property data collection and that information is passed on to the appraiser. And that property data collection can be completed by qualified individuals consisting of real estate agents, insurance agents, appraisers, so on and so forth. But that would be the hybrid appraisal. And then we have our traditional path, our traditional appraisals there. So that's really the cascade of valuation products and the direction the industry is going. And it's really great to see that the desktop appraisal has been added as a appraiser-based solution there. We're just going to walk through the actual appraisal form, and this is going to scroll relatively quickly, but this is the desktop form. And I really just wanted to show here that you guys can all recognize that this is very similar to your traditional appraisal report, your traditional 1004. So far, no changes on the form as we're scrolling through this. Same sales comparison approach, reconciliation section, all of that information is going to be the same. And then we get up to the top of page 3 of the report. We might have glanced over it, but nonetheless, top of page 3 has some specific form fields that Todd's actually going to get into a little bit more detail with you and share some of the nuances of this form. Though I will say, before passing it over to Todd for that, the desktop appraisal report does have all of the same requirements for exhibits as your traditional appraisal report. So be mindful as we go through this and you learn about the desktop that it's going to have all of the same interior photo requirements are still going to be there for appraisers, whether that be, or it does include kitchens, bathrooms, main living area. The desktop appraisal is going to have to provide interior photos. It's going to have to provide all the exterior photos as well. So front view, street, rear view, those are all requirements, photo requirements that are required in order for this. And if any of those photos can't be provided, then this would be an ineligible product and it would need to be upgraded to something else so that information could be obtained. But let's go ahead and jump into a little bit more of the form, and Todd's going to go over some of the specifics on that with you.
Sure, thank you. Great point about the exhibits. And with regard to the form itself and the process of filling it out, really minimal to no interruption there, as everything is pretty familiar. Where we start getting into some nuanced differences and some big differences of the desktop form are, as Ken alluded to, on the top of page 3. There are 4 fields which need to be filled out according to either Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac guidelines. Now, in the resources that we are going to provide you, on the last slide has all the resources that I alluded to in the intro. The Clear Capital FAQ and the Fannie Mae FAQ is where we got this kind of superimposed chart here. When working for Clear Capital and completing a desktop assignment, under the field that says subject property data collection method, the desktop data collection that we are providing to you falls into the category of other. Your appraisal forms are going to have drop menus for these categories. And when submitting an appraisal to Clear Capital, if the field is blank or somehow got misspelled, we will give you a data validation warning so that you can handle it upon submission and not have to worry about a clarification request. So this is just one nuanced difference. And to get more details on this, I'll just refer you to the resources that we're going to provide you with at the end. Now, where the real changes take place, and if we go ahead, just move on to the next slide here, are in the guts of the form. Now, these changes very much speak to appraiser concerns with regard to liability. If there is one question that I have heard and asked myself in conversations and attending other webinars, what is my liability going to be? I don't know the inspector. I wasn't there. I didn't see it. I want to very, very strongly encourage everyone to please reference the 1004 hybrid/desktop forms. It's a joint, and we're going to go ahead and provide that reference for you. It's a joint publication provided by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and goes line by line, showing exactly what was changed from the traditional 1004 and what verbiage was replacing those previous contents in the new form. We're going to run through just a couple of examples. We won't take too long to go through all of it. But for example, in the scope of work, the scope of work has been changed to indicate that the appraiser has obtained and is reviewing adequate and reliable information and is researching, verifying, and analyzing adequate information from public or private sources. And so we've included the option to include a few more sources to encompass products like the desktop data collection that Clear Capital will be providing. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one if we could. All right, so in the appraiser certification, this is going to be key, and I think this will get a lot of people's attention. I did not perform a personal visual inspection. I relied on information from third-party data sources, and I reported, not necessarily identified, but reported the physical deficiencies that could affect livability, soundness, and structural integrity. So the scope of work and appraiser certification's pre-printed language are very transparent about the realities of this assignment. And I believe we've got one more of the statement of assumptions and limiting conditions. So I've had to train myself to say floor plan instead of sketch. The difference being a floor plan shows the interior walls, whereas the sketch is kind of what we've all become used to, just the outline of the building with room labels kind of floating thereabout. So every desktop appraisal will include a floor plan. Beginning with assumption number 2 here. Well, we just kind of covered that. Let's skip to number 3. The appraiser has relied on data provided by third parties in the appraisal report. And we've highlighted 2 that may encompass and incorporate the desktop data collection and other sources such as property data services and property data aggregations. And this is an important point here in item number 3. After examination of the data and data sources, the appraiser has used only the data he or she considers reliable. And here's the kicker. The appraiser assumes there are no material omissions and makes no guarantees, express or implied, regarding the accuracy of this data. So a couple highlights there as to some of the very important changes that from a liability perspective do cover the appraiser. The desktop data collection and other types of data collections that you might receive from other AMCs are to be viewed as a data source. A data source, just like your MLS, is a data source, and a data source just like your public records. Now, it is always incumbent upon the appraiser to determine whether or not data is deemed reliable. But the industry is moving in this direction, as Ken alluded to earlier. And I'll speak to you all as an appraiser myself. The reality is that the appraiser will not quite see the entirety of the subject property like they would on a personal inspection, as they would when reviewing data, provided in a package. There's no question about that. But what the GSEs have found is that the gap that exists between the data you would collect on site and the data that you will be provided is so small, is insignificant enough to not increase the collateral risk. In other words, so far what the GSEs have found is that the data being provided is enough to make a credible appraisal. So beginning to kind of see these desktop data collections and other data sources as MLS, and I think actually this is probably a good time to mention, Ken, extraordinary assumptions will not be permitted that the data source being provided to the appraiser is reliable. And I think that's an important distinction. The extraordinary assumption is kind of a nice ripcord at times when used appropriately, but the GSEs have pretty clearly stated that a data source is either deemed credible or it is not. And no more would we use an extraordinary assumption for something like an MLS listing or a public record than we would use one for any other data source. So
yeah, that's
just put some clarity around that point.
Really good point, Todd, and it's one for our audience to really focus on, I think, because we did see a lot of that during the COVID desktop assignments that were being completed, or even some hybrid assignments. We do see that, and the GSEs, as Todd mentioned, have made it very clear that the appraiser should not be providing an extraordinary assumption, assuming the condition of the property to be in the same condition as the exterior of the home. So, as Todd mentioned, the data that you're using needs to be reliable and credible in order for you to form that opinion yourself. So excellent point, and one, I hope that the audience really takes a liking to that as they produce these reports.
And I hope so as well, and understandable that would be the instinct of the appraiser to want to include something like this when this product is new. Hey, we're curious creatures. We want to know things. We want to be there and we want to see things. And so part of, I guess, getting used to and accepting this product is accepting this kind of change in perspective and, understanding that the risk has not significantly increased given the intended use of the appraisal. So it's something for all of us to get used to. It's very understandable that our peers would have trepidation at first, certainly. So moving on, we've talked about the desktop data collection process. This is going to be different for every AMC that you work with. We certainly want to explain the process that Clear Capital is going through to go out and get this data for you. How is it being collected and how are we going to package it for you so that you can look at this and determine that this is enough and this is credible enough for me to produce a credible result. So Ken, I'll kick it back to you to give us a little bit of insight into Clear Capital's yet another set of initials, our DDC.
Yeah. All right, let's get into the nuts and bolts of the desktop data collection. So, and really how it's going to help the appraisers out. So, as Todd mentioned, requirement of the desktop, or we've talked about it on several instances, a floor plan is a requirement. Floor plan is different than a sketch used in traditional assignments. Now, many of you may have already included something similar to a floor plan in your traditional assignments, but please do know that it is a minimum requirement of the desktop that a floor plan be included. And that would consist of exterior dimensions, calculations need to be identified and shown, and then the interior walls and the layout of the home, so the intended user can assess the functional utility of the home. So with our desktop data collection process, they're going to be using Kubicasa, and that is the only solution on the market that provides ANSI aligned GLA, and that meets the GSE floor plan requirements. So this is going to be something that you don't have to worry about meeting GSE requirements on all of the Clear Capital desktop assignments, because we're going to be providing you with a floor plan powered by Kubicasa. Interesting, or the timing was ideal on this, is last week I was part of a meeting with a number of industry AMCs and others, lenders, but Freddie Mac put on the meeting last week, and they wanted to go over some of their early QC findings on the desktop appraisal. It's only been out for eligible for a month or so, and they wanted to share some of their findings with all AMCs and everyone in the industry. And Freddie Mac brought up that one of their major concerns, or really their only concerns that they've came across so far, is non-compliant floor plans. They've received from everyone in the industry or appraisers, but floor plans that do not comply with their requirements. And that would be either there's exterior dimensions that are missing from the floor plan, or the floor plan doesn't include the interior walls, or the other component was that the floor plan does not include the calculations. And all of those three are a requirement. And so the appraisal report would be considered defective from that standpoint if that information is not provided. So we're here at Clear Capital, we're really happy to report that we've solved that for you. This floor plan is going to provide all of that information for you. It's not going to have to be something that you worry about during your development process of the desktop appraisal. So let's get into a little bit more on the Clear Capital difference and how the desktop appraisal applies to your process. So Todd mentioned earlier, there are many different ways appraisers can obtain information to complete desktop assignments. So there does not have to be an inspection of the property. The only requirement of the desktop is that a floor plan is generated, and all of the required exhibits that we touched on before are also included, meaning the interior photos and exterior photos. And at Clear Capital, we want to make that that process as easy as we can for appraisers. So our objective here is that we are going to provide you with an inspection report that will provide you with credible information that will supplement any online data that you have out there, such as MLS. So let's take just a minute to kind of review that process and what that consists of. So as it relates to the desktop data collection, we are going to give you, as the appraiser, a inspection report of the subject property. So we are going to send a trained broker out to the panel. From our panel, we're going to send a trained broker out there to the subject property to complete an inspection of the subject property. From there, they're going to create a floor plan, and by leveraging Kubicasa. So that all of that information is going to be bundled up and presented to the appraiser. I think one of the important aspects here that I really find valuable with this is a lot of appraisers rely on MLS data all the time in their practice. And obviously, we all know as appraisers that those MLS listings generally are out there to show the best subject property that exists, right? May not show all of the physical deficiencies that exist or any external obsolescence that's out there. So what our desktop data collection process is it's going to identify any of that for you. So you can use this to supplement the MLS, but it's going to identify a number of different aspects that we'll get into here in another slide. But that agent, that broker, is going to be out at the property. They're going to fulfill that desktop data collection. They'll be able to submit that while they're out at the subject property or after their inspection. That will produce a floor plan of each structure that's created to ANSI standards. And we know that the desktop appraisal doesn't have to comply with ANSI standards because it's not an appraiser inspected process, but to give you some added comfort as appraisers, our Kubicasa sketch is going to align to ANSI standards. Once that is submitted, that desktop data collection is submitted by that broker, it's going to run through our quality assurance process over here at Clear Capital. We're going to run through that, make sure it's completed appropriately, it's all buttoned up and looks as good as it can for you, the appraiser. And then it's going to get passed on to you as the appraiser at the time of you are solicited or accept an order. You're going to get that information, that desktop data collection. And from there, you'll receive an image of an image addendum that contains all the interior photos that you can easily upload into your appraisal report, or you'll be provided with a zip file where you can pull out and select specific images there. But in addition to the images, you're going to get all kinds of other information about the inspection that you can include into your overall process. And you'll leverage that to complete your desktop appraisal, along with any other data sources you might have access to. And you'll submit that, and then you'll be completed with that order. So again, our job and our responsibility here is to try to make this process as easy as we can for you as the appraiser, and try to provide you as much information to help you produce a credible report. So let's talk a little bit more on what's included in the desktop data collection. There's a lot of information that's there, and Todd's going to walk through, give a high level overview of some of the information that's there, but this is, and we're not going to run through every exhibit here, but just to give you an idea of what information is included in the desktop data collection process, we have that here, and Todd's going to walk through some of that with you.
Yeah, thank you. No, we're definitely not going to go through this point by point. I think everyone kind of gets an idea. The exhibits that are required for the desktop assignment are very similar to the traditional assignment. And our process, as we mentioned, we are leveraging our network of nationwide brokers who have been highly trained, including work samples, many of whom have experience going back to the early days of this kind of hybrid bifurcated process. They are guided through the Clear Insight app, which prompts them to ensure that they're getting photos and all the requisite information from each room within the house. And so it's, when I mentioned that there were other methods of doing this, you could send a camera out to a borrower's home and they could take that camera and move it from room to room and collect the data that way. I believe that other methods include walking remotely while the appraiser sits at a desk and remotely walks an inspector through the home as they go through with their phone. So there are lots of different approaches, and it's an exciting time in that AMCs are really tapping into their strengths and the latest technologies to get the most credible product that they can gather for the appraiser. We like our method because it is a great combination of the technological advantage of being guided by the Clear Insight app, which is powered by Cubicasa, but also relies on the human factor. The human reliability factor, with human error kind of being tempered by the technological assistance. And so that is what we at Clear Capital felt like really played to our strengths when we thought to ourselves, how are we going to get the best data into the hands of the appraiser so they can complete a credible assignment? And I'll just point out this last, the app itself is not rigid. There are opportunities for inspectors to enter additional information. And just pointing out a couple of other things, solar panels and whether they're leased or owned, garage conversion details, square footage addition. So there are, opportunities to take care of the unknown or the surprises or the different, to make sure that all of the relevant information is put into the hands of the appraiser. Now, I guess before we go to the next slide, I'll just remind everyone, this is an origination assignment. And just because it's a desktop does not mean that appraisers don't have access to contact the point of contact or to contact agents. I know that there are concerns about all of these data sources, but we just want to emphasize, let's just fall back on USPAP that says it's up to the appraiser to determine what data is credible and what is not. And so this data, desktop data collection is certainly intended to be extremely helpful, but is also intended to be checked against your local data sources of record. And it's going to be up to you to determine, what is the most credible based on everything that you've got in front of you. If you have a question that can't be answered with the data that you have, please just let us know. We don't want to make you feel stranded. We don't want to, of course, don't want to imply that you're obligated to use just anything that's put in front of you. This is a process. Just keep that in mind when the questions do arise, and please just stay in touch with us and let us know what questions you have, and we'll do absolutely everything we can to help you complete that assignment credibly or upgrade it if needed, and kind of go from there.
Todd, this might be, before we transition too, it might be a
Yeah.
good opportunity just to touch on that for the appraisers that are doing work for other AMCs out there,
Mhm.
which many of you are, that some of those AMCs are going to be using our Kubicasa application as well. So they could see the same process on the Kubicasa and the floor plan generated for assignments that are completed for other AMCs too. And I know you were part of a webinar there a couple weeks ago where that came up, but I thought that would be important to touch on too.
Yeah, actually, that's a great lead in. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And we can address that. So here's an example of what it looks like. This was just taken right from the Kubicasa website. Kind of a virtual example of what it looks like to put a floor plan together. So these bullet points to the left here, we kind of touched on those already. We'll just kind of, I guess, summarize everything by, Ken, to your point, I did attend a webinar. It was a small sample of AMCs, but 8 fairly prominent AMCs. There were 8 altogether, of which Clear Capital was one. And I believe that of the 8, 4 were incorporating Kubicasa into their data collection methods. And so, Kubicasa was not so long ago acquired by Clear Capital. So Clear Capital's had an opportunity to oversee its use and to make changes to improve its accuracy and improve its overall user experience. And so with, this is a pretty big change for a lot of appraisers. And so with that experience and with that kind of direct influence into the quality of the product, and with the acknowledgement of our company peers, having acknowledged the usefulness of this program, with that type of industry acceptance, hopefully breeds more confidence in the product. No product is going to be perfect out of the gate. But certainly over time, to the point that we are now, where this product is live and in action, Kubicasa has been, deemed a leader, if not the leader, in this space. Now, I will mention, I talk to a lot of appraisers fairly often, and many of them say, "Hey, I'm already measuring to ANSI standards, so this change is no big deal for me. I'm just going to do what I do," and that's fantastic if it's not at all disruptive to your process. But in the midst of all this change, if it's just one more change that you don't want to have to dig too deeply into, Kubicasa is available for individual use as well. We've got the website here, sales@kubicasa.com. It is right for some, it's not right for everyone to work into their individual practice, but if you have questions about it as far as pricing and things like that, I would just encourage everybody to take a look, see if it's right for you. So here's an example of our desktop data collection that we're scrolling through rather quickly here. It's a fairly streamlined document, but does include, there's an example of the floor plan, address verification, all of the exterior and interior photos with captions and opportunities to indicate any deferred maintenance that the inspector might encounter. So some of the confusion I think that existed early on was between the property data collection, or the PDC, that was a component of the hybrid appraisal, and this DDC, which is the desktop data collection. They look very similar from within the walls of Clear Capital, because the way that Fannie Mae required the hybrid data collection to be collected was with third-party inspectors. At Clear Capital, we have decided to use that method because it plays to our strengths in our collection for information pertaining to the DDC. So that's why if there was any confusion as to what's the difference between these two, because they look awfully similar, that's the reason why. It's simply because Clear Capital's method of data collection kind of mirrors that which was required by Fannie Mae. Like I said, other AMCs are going to do it differently, but this is the method that we've selected. All right. Benefits and resources. The latter probably being the at the forefront of everybody's mind. Now, although this is a new product and a lot to get used to, there are certain benefits of taking part in this new product. And certainly we want to provide you with the resources that we promised. So Ken, for that, I'll kick it over to you. and share with our audience what's the upside of accepting these assignments going forward.
Sounds good. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the benefits of the desktop appraisal. So there's a number of them, and I'm hoping that everyone on the call here is starting to understand some of those. But let's take a little bit of a run through of what these are. First off, faster turn times. Evidence shows that this product, it can be completed about 50% faster than a traditional appraisal report. You might ask yourself why, how can that be done, so on and so forth. And I'll just say that it's not uncommon for appointments to be made and completed during evenings and or weekends. We've touched on, we've got a very large network of brokers to be able to choose from to try to get out to these properties and do a relatively quick inspection and then pass that information on to the appraiser. So turn times are a big one in terms of how long these assignments can take. Everyone can probably relate to reduced expenses, meaning being gas and auto. Right now, I mean, let's face it, gas prices are kind of at an all-time high right now. Appraisers specifically, spend a lot of time behind the windshield driving around. And with the desktop appraisal, that eliminates that need. So removes the hassle of driving and the auto expenses that go along with it. Another one is increased productivity. You as the appraiser don't have to spend your time scheduling appointments, working with borrowers or listing agents and working around their schedules. These can be completed on your time, which I think is very, very valuable to proper work-life balance. You can schedule or accept these assignments based on your time. You can complete them anywhere, regardless of where you're physically located. As long as you have geographic competency in that market, you can go on vacation and still keep your business going and crank a few of these orders out. Although I wouldn't encourage it when you're on vacation, but it's possible. You can do that. Again, as long as you have geographic competency in that market, these can be completed from your desk, wherever that location is. Also, this allows the appraiser to focus their time, their energy on the development of the appraisal process. That is probably most critical, being the analysis, the market research that goes into an appraisal report and establishing a credible opinion of value. So allows you to have some increased productivity from that standpoint. Fewer correction requests is another one. Let's face it, we all as appraisers dislike receiving revision requests from a customer 2 days after you submitted an appraisal report, or you don't like submitting an appraisal report and getting a correction request from a quality assurance department. That slows down your process. We understand that, and we're working with you on that. This product is 50% less likely to receive correction requests than a traditional appraisal report. So again, some of that you might ask, well, how is that? Why? Keep in mind that inspection process that we talked about, that goes through a quality assurance process on our side before it's even received by you. So there's a lot of vetting that goes into that aspect of the desktop data collection before it's even given to you. And that really helps mitigate any questions and concerns that are out there. The floor plan certainty, we've touched on that here a number of times, but that's the ANSI aligned digital GLA that is included in here. It's going to mitigate those risks of incorrect floor plans or missing floor plan information that I touched on earlier, that Freddie Mac said was a early indication of some of the desktop appraisal problems they were seeing. So we're going to mitigate that. You aren't going to have to worry about that. And then last but not least is trustworthy data. We're going to be supplying you with this information. We've got that network of a very large network trained and trustworthy brokers that have been completing these types of products for years, and it's trustworthy, and we hope that you'll find that as well. So a number of of benefits to the appraiser that is this desktop appraisal. And we're hoping that you guys out there will take advantage of this, and, you know, adapt with the way the GSEs are moving here. So with that, unless I missed anything, Todd, or anything else you have to add on the advantages here, benefits.
No, I think you pretty much touched on anything, and I like your advice about not working on vacation when possible.
Right on.
I'm taking that to heart.
I'm sure you will. Let's go ahead and talk about the resources we have available.
Sure, as promised. So here are some Clear Capital and industry resources that we think you're all going to find very helpful. We'll begin at the top, a couple of Clear Capital resources. We put together a desktop appraisal FAQ that is comprised of both FAQs taken from Fannie Mae documentation, as well as information regarding our desktop data collection specifically. So getting started with Clear Capital and how Clear Capital is going to work with you on this process, that's a great resource at the top. We've got a link to Cubicasa in case you're interested in more information about that floor plan app. Now, as far as industry news goes, you know, Ken alluded to earlier, the industry, the appraiser capacity report. If you're interested in more details about that, we've got a link for you. For those not familiar, Fannie Mae puts out a series of cute little folksy videos called the Noble Appraiser series, and they did put one together on the desktop appraisal. It doesn't have any audio except for I don't know, folksy little tune playing in the background, but it does give great information as to their perspective on the desktop appraisal. Fannie Mae about desktop appraisals. This is the very extensive Fannie Mae FAQ where we got a lot of our information today. Really encourage everybody. There's about 20 FAQs provided right from the source there. The source that we alluded to earlier is the URAR hybrid and desktop appraisal forms. This is a line by line illustration of all of the changes that are made to the hybrid and the desktop forms and the differences between those and the traditional 1004. And then finally, just for good measure, although the desktop assignments or assignments that are not inspected by an appraiser do not require ANSI. ANSI is very much a part of our lives now, so we wanted to provide you with this resource. This is Fannie Mae's take on how they are incorporating ANSI guidelines into their own requirements. And so we hope you find that reference useful as well. And Bridgel, thank you very much. As I've rolled those off, they were being all popped into the chat. And again, this will be available for replay if you're not near your computer right now.
Perfect. So we're going to get into some Q&A for the last 9 minutes we have. We did get a lot of questions in, so we'll try to answer as many as we can today. If not, we'll be in touch with you. So for our first question, we have, what will desktop fees be relative to traditional 1004 assignments?
All right. Well, Todd, I can take a stab at that, but feel free to supplement as needed. Good question. Probably one that's on a lot of appraisers' mind is, how does this affect me, right? How am I going to be compensated? So appreciate the question. I would say overall, fees for desktop assignments, they're going to be market specific. So I can't give a one size fits all answer to that, but they are going to be market specific. And know that you'll be able to evaluate the fee when you're solicited on an order for one of these assignments. And as with all assignments, you'll be able to accept, decline, or request a higher fee if the fee isn't sufficient for the level of work that you think is involved with this. So I think it's fair to say that the fees overall will probably be something less than a traditional appraisal, but hopefully folks can understand that, because the level of work associated with a traditional appraisal is a lot more extensive than that of a desktop appraisal. So that's how I would respond to that question. I think, you know, maybe to add on to that response is that we've touched on this before, but we're really trying to make this process as efficient and as helpful as we can to our appraisers. So we're trying to supply you with as much data and information to help you be successful completing these. And, you know, that's not going to be the same approach that all other AMCs take. You don't have to have a desktop data collection to complete this process. You could rely on just MLS if that was sufficient and you deem that to be credible. That could be, you wouldn't have to have the inspection piece that's going to go along with it. But we feel like it's best to arm you as the appraiser with as much unbiased information as possible to help you be able to produce a credible report. So that kind of plays into the fees a little bit in terms of what's being provided and the level of work. But you know, certainly we have our appraiser experience team that you can reach out to if you want to discuss specifically fees in your market or that. There's contact information that we'll be sharing with you later on here today, where you can reach out and have some of those conversations as well.
Okay, the next question. The desktop product seems like a big step forward towards eliminating the need for appraisers. Can you change my mind about that?
I'll take a stab at that one, see if I can. I don't know about changing anybody's mind, but I can certainly offer some, at least of my perspective, based on the research that I've done here. I've had a lot of conversations with my peers that are concerned that part of the inspection process is being taken from them. And that is just a further step in the process of eliminating appraisers from the equation. It's a valid concern when you're taking away part of the process, and it's a kind of a, you know, it's a fun part of the process, right? We like going on inspections and, you know, seeing the variety of homes that are out there. I think I would be more concerned if the GSEs were turning toward a more automated solution more quickly. I guess, in other words, removing the appraiser from the inspection did not increase the collateral risk, and there just aren't enough of us to meet the demands of volume. And so by increasing capacity and improving turn times by 50%, while at the same time not increasing risk to a significant degree, it was just too big of a prospect for the GSEs to refuse, it seems. In other industry news, there are programs in place. For those of you that are familiar with PREA, it was recently approved by the Appraisal Qualifications Board. The PREA program, which I always forget that acronym, Practical Applications of Real Estate Appraisal. Thank you. It is a way in which new appraisers, after they receive their requisite education, can advance toward their license faster than they normally would, only under the tutelage of a mentor. And so it doesn't replace the mentor, but it supplements and speeds the process along. And so I'm seeing some industry efforts, and we're hearing a lot about, you know, increasing access to the industry, improving diversity of the profession. And so I'm very much heartened by these efforts to grant more access and make the path to becoming an appraiser a little easier. And so that side of things, I guess, gives me hope for the future as an appraiser who's not planning on retiring anytime soon and wants to remain relevant in this industry, just like many of you. I am heartened by the fact that the industry seems to be making effort to keep us relevant, but that this is just a necessary change as far as, you know, the introduction of these hybrid desktop type of products. So not sure if I'm changing any mind, but that's just one appraiser's kind of view on things.
No, I think you did good on that, Todd. You covered it well. And I would just want to reiterate from one of those earlier slides that I went over, is that it's really great to see the GSEs adopt the desktop appraisal and incorporate that into their overall valuation product solution. So great to see that they do understand the importance of an appraiser's role, and that the desktop product itself has been added, not taken away from as a solution. So I think that's a positive for us too.
Agreed.
Okay, we have about 2 minutes left, but if you want to squeeze one more in,
let's go for it.
Do that. Okay. Does data collection count as significant appraisal assistance? What if your data conflicts with my sources?
I'll try to take a truncated response to that, Todd. I would say the desktop data collection is not significant assistance, but in keeping with USPAP and GSE requirements for desktop appraisals, or for any other appraisal for all that matters, the appraiser needs to consider all sources of information during the normal course of their business and use the information that they deem to be reliable and credible. And if there are discrepancies in any of their sources of information, just discuss how those were resolved, or why you landed on what you landed on. The desktop data collection and floor plan is a source of information, just like MLS. So if there are no reasons for you to deem it unreliable, it may render it very reliable in that aspect. But if you have concerns with it, you, as an appraiser, need to adhere to USPAP and use the information that you do deem the most reliable.
Only thing I might add to that, Ken, is that other data sources like MLS and public records, which are used, do not necessarily constitute significant assistance. And so looking at it like a data source is really kind of the key here.
Yeah, good
as
point.
long as the information being offered is objective.
All right.
Hopefully
we
that
still
answers
have
that question.
we still have a few questions left, but we will try to get out answers to you guys as soon as we can, and reach out. If you do have a question that comes up after this webinar, please feel free to use the email that is on the slide right now to send us what your question is. And just a reminder, we will be sending out the recording of this along with the resources that we put inside the chat. So you'll be getting that in your inboxes tomorrow.
Yeah, apologies if we couldn't get to everybody, but thank you so much for being here. We hope that this was helpful and informative, and we look forward to working with you going forward and being a good partner to you. So thank you again for taking the time.
Yes, agreed. Thanks everyone for your time today. We appreciate you.